The Centennial School. This meeting of the Centennial School Board is called to order at 6:32 p.m. on February 22nd, 2023, and a quorum is present. Thank you for being present today and giving your time and attention to the school district. Any item that'll be voted on tonight has been posted along with the agenda on Board Book. Please follow the links on the district website for further information. Are there any additions or amendments to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Was that an aye from David too?
Yeah, sorry, my video is not working tonight.
No worries. Excellent. So the agenda is approved. Next up, we have an introduction of guests. In an introduction of guests, we have a proclamation that I'd like to read. Before I start the proclamation, I do want to share that today is also actually School Bus Driver Appreciation Day. And they definitely deserve some appreciation after the day that they had. And then, Jess, did you have something to add at this point?
No, I was just trying to give some
Yes.
a shout out to those nice people.
For sure. So the Classified School Employees Week proclamation. Whereas education of our youth is imperative to Oregon and our nation, and whereas classified school employees are a vital component of Oregon's public school system, and whereas classified employees work directly with all children, they are the school personnel responsible for the transportation and nutrition of our children, the maintenance of school property, and they are clerical workers and education assistants. And whereas under the leadership of the Oregon School Employees Association, classified employees with their diverse talents have created the necessary environment essential to educating our youth. An educated Oregon is a healthy Oregonian. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Centennial School District designates the week of March 6th through the 10th, 2023 as Classified School Employees Week. And be it further resolved that the Centennial School District calls on the community to join with it in personally thanking and recognizing classified staff for their dedication and devotion to their work. Give anybody a moment to share a shout out or a personal word, if any directors do. Awesome. No worries. One more thing I would like to share, something that I learned recently is that our very own OSEA President Chris Dahl was recently recognized as an emerging leader at a national retreat hosted by AFTU, which is OSEA's parent union in Baltimore last month. So congratulations. I love that the national recognition that Centennial is getting. Thank you, Chris. Moving on to minutes, the previous minutes draft.
Chair Selesky, sorry to interrupt. I saw Vice Chair Shields had a comment to make on the last topic.
Perfect. I'm sorry I missed that.
No worries. It's just that all of our staff have been under such incredible stress in these last couple of years, and I've really appreciated how our classified staff is continually stepping up. And sometimes incredibly difficult odds, right? With staffing issues that have plagued us and other districts. What we continue to hear from the district staff is their dedication continually shows through. So just want to know that we really do appreciate the kind of time and effort that they extend, not just on their jobs during the hours that they're in the classroom or in the bus or in the dining services, but the hours that they also provide support to our students outside of some of those job duties and other assignments. So thank you very much. And hopefully in March, our weather will be better so that we can have a few more people to be able to hear our appreciation and have an opportunity to thank people more in person.
And Chair Salowski, before we move on, I also wanted to just echo the appreciation that I just heard from Vice Chair Shields and Chair Salowski as well. And also wanted to call on Dr. Katsuda, who is working with OSEA to plan something for Classified Appreciation Week. So Dr. Katsuda, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about the plans for that week, that would be great.
Oh, yes. Chris Dowell and I have been collaborating on a variety of activities, one being a breakfast the Wednesday of that week. And we're mindful of the fact that many staff work varying hours. So we'd like to probably organize some kind of pickup breakfast to make it easier for them as they come in at different times and deliver food to staff and departments that don't work in the morning. You can't pick up a breakfast burrito or something of that nature. And we also have a little treat we're putting together that we delivered to buildings for the classified staff as well. That's accompanied by a card that we are all collectively providing to them, and thanks. So.
And we will make sure that the breakfast is on board members' calendars in case anybody is available to make it for that day.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair Salowski.
Thank you all very much. At this point, we'll be moving on to minutes. The previous minutes draft has been distributed in your board pack. Are there any corrections or amendments to the minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second,
Let's see, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Excellent, the minutes are approved. Next up, we have reports. It looks like our first report. Would you like to introduce that, James?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. So we have our strategic planning update. Originally, this was scheduled to be a presentation of the initial draft of the strategic plan, and I believe that you will get to see where that is in progress. We had a discussion with our facilitator, Lauren, last week, and we decided that it's better to bring forward the best quality product that we can rather than the quickest product that we can. And so I believe that tonight we will see a snapshot of where we are in progress and an idea of what our next steps will be. And I will go ahead and call on Director Callahan to offer any additional opening words that she wants before we kick it over to Lauren.
Great. Thank you, James. So I'm going to hand this off to Lauren in just a second. Towards the end of her presentation with us, I've got a couple slides to share related to the connection between ODE's integrated planning and the strategic planning that we're doing. So stay tuned. Go ahead, Lauren. Welcome.
Okay. Hey, good evening, everybody. I hope you're staying safe and warm, and I'm sure you're excited, looking forward to your snow day. We have a snow day in Vermont as well. So we have some excited children in my household. I'm looking forward to sharing this update and appreciate the opportunity that we've been given by having an additional week to gather further community input and to further refine the process. So I will share my screen and let me know if it's coming through for you. How's that looking? Good. Okay. So we wanted to put together some of the draft elements to give you an update of where we are. You will see that the drafts are drafty in the sense that they're highlighted in red. They're not where they need to be yet, but they will get there. So we want to give you a clear snapshot of where we are now, and then what the next steps are before the next time we gather. So again, just wanted to remind that, the purpose of the work, what we're really aiming for is less the fancy product at the end, but how we all come around in alignment around what is our purpose for our work and how are we going to move our people, programs, and processes and structures to get on the same page, moving in the same direction. We really are seeing the fruition of that through the process. Having an equity-centered, community engaged process we've had hundreds and hundreds of voices contribute to that process. And we are strengthening that engagement this week and next through every campus The principals are leading engagement with their staff around reviewing kind of what you're looking at now, and they're getting the opportunity to provide input so we can integrate that into our next phase. So I'll go ahead and just kind of remind us of where we've been. We started looking at student data, gone through analysis, and we are fully into the what do we want to do going forward. And so the plan will have several components. We're going to share some updates on 2 from student learning. So one is for you to take a look at. You'll see the portrait of a graduate in its current draft. It's something that all of the campuses and community are having the opportunity to provide feedback on. That will be integrated to create the final draft of that for your review in a couple of weeks. Similarly, the goals and measures of student achievement, we're getting the review of that as well. And so those will be refined and updated. Once those goals and measures are set, then we establish the performance benchmarks, and Mo is going to talk, Director Colley is going to talk more about that when she speaks about the longitudinal targets. We have drafts of the 4 pillars that we'll share. You'll see the professional practices are drafted, and the effective instruction in core areas. Part of this is the integration with the equity audit. And so over the next, I guess I think next week is the last of the campuses to be visited through the instructional audit that's happening on each campus. And what comes of that report is going to be integrated into the plan. Finally, we're looking at the strategy map and the strategic priorities, which is the last remaining piece to really be crafted. We've made some good progress, and the core planning team is going to have the opportunity to revisit that, refine it with the input gathered in the last couple of weeks. So we will want to share the current draft of the profile of a Centennial School District graduate. We continue to have 6 categories, that are 6 qualities that are being focused on, supporting all students in growing to be academically and socially literate, to be passionate and purposeful individuals who develop both community and self-empathy, who are socially responsible and demonstrate cultural advocacy. They're inquisitive and innovative, and they're future ready. There was a lot of feedback that was gathered on this, suggestions for kind of refining, and we're happy to hear any thoughts, although we know that we're going to dig into more details when we talk about it on the 9th. But this will evolve between now and the next time we get together. We offered a possibility of having it be like a future ready graduate as a topic and integrating some of the ideas. By and large, the feedback has been no. We want to make sure we have that future ready as its own category, and really ensuring that we're centering students' voice in terms of their desire to have very concrete and specific ways that we're supporting them for their transition into life after high school. So, but both of those are included now because I wanted to share those. So there are 5 goals for student success that have been drafted in the plan. Your first goal is really talking about how are you building a strong foundation for students in the kindergarten through 3rd grade. And then the second goal is focused on supporting all students' well-being and inclusion. The 3rd goal is focused on student voice, leadership, and empowerment. Goal 4 is equitable access to high-quality academics. And goal 5 is preparation for success in an evolving world. Each of the goals now has a short descriptive statement, and between 3 and I think in some cases 5, we'll see measures about how we would be knowing whether or not we are achieving the goal that we set forth. So you see here, increasing the percentage of students who are engaging in a preschool or early learning programs, measuring and paying attention to both growth and achievement of grade level standards in English, math, and science by 3rd grade. And then also growth and attainment on milestones, the social, emotional, physical, and developmental milestones. So the measures are designed to be looking both leading and lagging. Like the achievement at the end, we might see, right, as the fruition, but a leading indicator is going to be how many students do we see engaging in preschool programs, and so on. We have for well-being and inclusion, we're looking at the perceptions. This is students' perceptions of safety, inclusion, and belonging. So this would be directly correlated to, continuing the student survey and gathering that feedback, as well as focus groups. Also looking at equitable access to social emotional support services and instruction. It also is looking at disproportionality in particular in terms of referrals, suspensions, and alternative placements. So students being placed in learning settings outside of the schools. That's really all coming around the question of inclusion. And then also looking at regular attendance. These are listed not as percent, increase or decrease. This is just what we're measuring. Those performance targets that we'll get to, we'll be saying like, we want to decrease disproportionality by X, and we want to increase perceptions of this by Y. So that comes with once we set those targets. So some people will, just want to clarify that. Empowerment, student voice and leadership. We're talking about their students' perceptions and experiences, of being able to use their voice. Empowerment and opportunity to contribute to change. Also the percent of students engaged in outside co-curricular or extracurricular activities, and percent of students engaged in classrooms. That one might be actually measured by classroom observations, right? Data and feedback. Equitable access to high quality academics. We have 3. One is looking at the percentage of students who participate and successfully complete an advanced coursework. Some examples of that are IB, AP, dual enrollment, certification for like CTE, right? But advanced coursework could also be even more encompassing depending on students' different learning needs. Access to STEAM, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math experiences, and access to academic supports. Finally, we have our preparation for evolving worlds. Again, there was an interest in having access to STEAM experiences. And I think that the intent here is around science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, like those types of experience, not necessarily the suggestion of an integrated STEAM program. So I wanted to be clear to make that distinction. And for this one, it was emphasis thinking about this K-12. How are we ensuring that students are having that real exposure and to that breadth of learning starting in the early years, so that they are very well prepared by the time they graduate. Also looking at the percentage of students who engage in a future ready plan aligned to the profile of a graduate. So the idea is that students would be actively engaged in designing what their pathways are in their future in age of developmentally appropriate ways along their journey. Percentage of students who complete a demonstration of learning at key transition years to be determined. So, what points is it? 3rd, 5th, 7th, whatever those years are. Percentage of students who are on track in 9th grade, and then keeping an eye on graduation rate. So this is where we stand in terms of having some concrete focus in terms of the students' goals and measures. So from there, we turn to, well, what is the work of the adults in the system? And the framework for that we call our 4 pillars. And the Centennial School District so far, and the planning teams have drafted 4 pillars. The first pillar focuses solely on teaching and learning. So what is happening between students and content and classroom within that structure. And so for pillar A, we have culturally responsive student-centered teaching and learning. And the description statement that the Centennial School District will ensure that each student will experience equitable access to culturally sustaining and responsive, rigorous instruction that equitably supports their continuous growth and learning or achievement. That's sort of those 2 words were both used. Pillar B is all focused on the recognition that schools can't do it alone. They must work in partnership with families, community, and students. So for pillar B, we have a collaborative community that the Centennial School District will cultivate and sustain partnerships with families and communities by building trust, seeking understanding, and promoting authentic 2-way communication to strengthen student success and well-being. Pillar C is focused on supporting, it's the capacity building pillar for the folks within the Centennial School District. So focus on staff. So the Centennial School District will ensure that all staff work in inclusive and supportive environments while developing and growing their capacity to effectively serve each student. And then finally, pillar D is really, what is your organizing system to bring all the pieces together? And the draft for this pillar is holistic systems of excellence. that the Centennial School District will build, design, and refine mutually accountable systems across the district to ensure each member of our community works collectively and each student thrives. So those present the foundation, and I'm not going to read the rest of the slides. I promise you. I just wanted to read those foundational ones because those are the ones that have been refined the most. And this part of telling the story, where are we going? How are we going to get there? There are details that go underneath this. So one is that it says TBD on the right, and D means like fully drafted. We have the material, but it hasn't been wordsmithed yet. The instructional focus team has taken the lead on drafting what are the specific teaching practices that we will develop in terms that are aligned to the pillar in order to move the district forward. So there are specific practices that are laid out. Again, it's in red. Will be finally defined. The second part is that it's not just teachers, it's also looking at leadership practices. So what are the leadership moves that we need to do? This is principal leadership, site leadership, tier 1 teams, instructional leadership teams. It's really about how are we going to lead the work? And then what is the district organization or the school kind of organization need to do in order to support those leaders and those teaching practices? So this we'll go into more detail on the 9th when we have this a little bit more fleshed out. But this is all about that circle number 2, teaching in terms of effective instruction. The last part is where we are getting our final kind of input and gathering right now is around our what we call our strategy map, which outlines the strategic priorities and key actions that's associated with the plan. It's an organizing framework that helps us understand on one page and one image, like what is the work, right? What is the work of the plan? So this was drafted, the very first draft, coming off of the last core planning team, where the kind of big ideas were first elevated by looking at the input from various stakeholders. This will evolve. We have already gathered feedback, and there's definitely further refinement that's necessary. So just look forward to seeing the next iteration, and the core planning team is going to be taking the lead on finishing this up. Finally, just to give you a snippet of the ways that we're gathering feedback. So you can see this is just a snippet from a note catcher from the instructional focus team that had some feedback around the strategy map. This is the instructional focus team was recommending actually specific key actions that might be part of the makeup. And this is a snapshot just from the form that our staff is engaging in to give their feedback. And they're not giving individual feedback. They're sitting in table groups. They're talking to one another. They're mirroring the process we've been using, and then they're sharing their consensus thoughts into this form to be gathered together. So that is my update in terms of next steps. The campus and department feedback is ongoing through next week. I think 6 schools are this week. We have a few more that we'll do next week. We'll be synthesizing the feedback and the revisions. We have the core planning team next week on Tuesday, which is really the final input. They're the last team to kind of meet and be drafting material and give some refinement and feedback. I'll be meeting with the cabinet 2 days later to review that kind of synthesis and draft that we will be resharing for the board to take a look at that complete draft on the 9th. So thank you. I hope that provides some context of where we are, where we're headed. And I know I'm going to turn it over to Director Callahan to do, how does this connect to ODE?
Yeah. First, I just want to offer up if there are questions
Yes.
around the update to date so far.
I just want to thank you for all of your efforts and input with this. I think it is clear that we will be needing that second board meeting in March. So I just want to make that blanket. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page with that.
Great.
Great, thank you.
Question, Chair Zalewski, about the second date you're referring to, the March 22nd date, is that right?
Yes.
And then I see on this slide, it says board on 3/9. That's a Thursday.
Oh, is that my bad?
Okay, just so my life runs on a calendar.
Yes, I understand.
oh, oh.
I get making the calendar errors, not.
No, that's fine. So so we meet on the 8th and we have our meeting set for the 22nd, you know, as we need to get this pulled together. Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Oh, your slide, sorry.
thanks, Lauren.
I fixed it.
Thank you. So this has been an amazing process for me. Just I was telling the group last night, being in each meeting, and then also paying attention to ODE's expectations and process while watching it unfold as a district has been pretty dynamic. And so I've spent some time really trying to dig into where those the intersect is between what we're doing and what we're expected to submit. And it really does center around these 4 common goals from ODE and the state of education, state board of education. And so the equity advanced process, well-rounded education, engaged community and evidence of engagement, and strengthening our systems and capacity. Those are, you have seen those before in our student investment account and likely other of the one, which is one of the 6 chevrons that we're really aligning to. And just to remind folks, that chevron is high school success, student investment account, continuous improvement planning, career and technical ed, everyday matters, and early indicator and intervention systems. So there's 6 of them. Most of those have funding attached to them. And so that's the integration. So if you think about those, and then across all of those 6, looking at these 4 areas. So instead of reading the descriptors, I'll just set it up that what I did is I've looked at the criteria from ODE under each of these sections. And so this wording is the wording of how the submission will be assessed, of course, shortened into just phrases so that you could get a sense. The equity advance process for me is really us getting better at knowing the strengths of our students, knowing who our students are, and knowing what they need. And really ensuring that every student and each student needs are met educationally. And then you can read for yourself. The check marks on the right side are just my way of saying, look, this is what the state is saying, and we have done this, and we are doing this in this process. I'll just make one caveat that the performance-backed, they're not going to help us budget, but there'll be some consulting in terms of process. So the well-rounded education piece is that goes well beyond the instructional practices. It includes the instructional practices, but think about all the things that have surfaced as you all have been in various committees. They're really listed here. Looking at the social emotional wellness, looking at extracurricular activities and opportunities for kids, looking at how we transition from level to level. All of these will have to be addressed when we hit the submission. So either that we're in process, or that we have the process, or that we'll be working on it over the next 4 years. The engaged community and evidence of engagement, that was the easiest one for me to record here, just thinking about the extensive community outreach that we have done. I've not seen that in any of my past experiences, and it's pretty impressive. And so I think Centennial can really be proud of that. We're going to hit the mark on that, and I think in fine fashion in terms of the integrated planning. And then the strengthening systems and capacities, that's really identifying, making sure that we are held accountable and we're putting in processes to avoid the disparities, and so that our students experience. And so really that is through professional development. We'll have to speak to that. We'll have to speak to how we're using coaching. for teaching, around teaching and learning. What are those specific indicators for interventions, and how are we going to monitor the student outcomes by specific groups? There'll be a long range plan, and then there'll be benchmarks that we'll be asked to hit. And I think I mentioned in my last update that process, though we'll do some drafting now, that'll continue. So our work continues it through the spring to finalize that. And ODE is at this point suggesting that they're going to be coming alongside us, giving us ongoing feedback to massage those measurements as we get to the end of the year. So that's really lines up very well with the work that we're doing, what ODE is saying and what we're doing. And so I'm really confident that we're going to put together a viable plan. So this next one is a little bit more nuanced, right? Because a lot of these, and I'll talk about some of them. We haven't necessarily named it or focused on it, but the information is there. And so our job in the background is to really kind of connect the dots. And so I'll call out some of those dots that we'll need to connect. The narrative itself will be how we went through the planning process. There are over like 150 questions that will have to be answered. We'll have to identify potential barriers, some risks or choices that could impact our focal student groups. And so to really try to mitigate any of those barriers so that kids can meet their goals. Policies and procedures in terms of ensuring that kids aren't stigmatized. And they specifically call out our youth navigating homelessness. And so that will have to be addressed. Career technical education is really interesting as I see the criteria, because it is threaded throughout all of the elements of the plan of the application. And so they're really looking for that we're calling attention to that throughout that process, which I appreciate Laura making note of that in her update. Let's see. Continuing to develop partnerships, and so we'll be held accountable for describing what our efforts are around that, but specifically with employers and how we expand work-based learning. And we know that has surfaced in numerous settings, be it from kids, be it from the community forums, be it from parent groups. So I'm looking forward to that. And then let's see here. Tab into your budget tabs in this special code. Yeah, so basically the third button on the right, the bullet on the right, planning tab and 2-year budgeting tabs in the submission have to be complete. So that's all around budgeting. They're not looking for us to have a 4-year budget laid out, but we're going to have to make sure that we have at least 1 to 2 years kind of etched out. And then each activity in terms of the budget will have to connect to a strategy, and that the budget will align with the allocation estimates for each funding stream. So think about the Chevron. Those are really your funding streams. And so we'll have to be very intentional to connect those. Specify optional partnerships, looking at FTE types, how are we using our folks with these resources? And then, of course, just appropriate allowable usage, right? And then, so that's that piece. And then really following the specific requirements for high school success, student investment account, career tech ed, the CSI, TSI, which I can't, for the life of me, I couldn't tell you what those two mean today, right? But each of those has their own requirements. And so those requirements will still need to be fulfilled within the plan. So those are some of the nuances that you wouldn't hear or see necessarily, but they're there in our process. But those are the things I think are most important. And the rest are all logistics and paperwork that you don't want to know. So any questions?
TSI and CSI, I believe, is comprehensive support and improvement versus targeted
Targeted.
support and improvement. They're
Thank you, James.
designations that are given to schools based on outcomes measurements from previous years.
Yes. And those schools have been identified and they are, James, correct me if I get this wrong, but Powell Butte, Meadows, Park Lane, and Oliver.
Director
have a
Shields, did I see
question.
your hand? Go ahead.
Yes. Oh God, talk about word salads. Um,
Yes, it is.
Or, will we, when all is said and done, you know, it is two different processes, even though they're melding very, very well together. But there's going to be terminology that's going to be very specific to us as a district because of the way that we've been planning the
Mhm.
strategic plan, and then very specific to ODE. Will there be a crosswalk of sorts so that I know you're going to be able to figure it out, Mo, because you're going to live it and eat it and breathe it. But I don't know that I will know.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about the words that, you know, I'm reading the very first bullet, 6 common program elements aligning the actions of the budgets, right? So we even have words like elements and pillars and things of these
Mhm.
natures that
Mhm.
after a while get, for me, a little bit infuriating because I'm so linear in my thought process. I try to find those matching, you know, words. So there may not be the ability to do that because it's not even appropriate to do so, but it may be appropriate to have some kind of a crosswalk.
Mhm.
So whether it's visual or helping us understand these words are similar to these words. So yes, it is true that we have melded these two processes together in a collective way, in a thoughtful manner,
Mhm.
in meeting all of these new, if you will, goals that the Oregon Department of Education has kind of placed on us.
Mhm.
So we don't get lost, or
Mhm.
maybe I don't get lost.
Yeah.
It might be more specific to my learning style and
Yeah.
being able to absorb. So I get it, sorta.
Yeah. That is a good question. And the teacher in me says, of course we'll do that because that'll meet people's needs. Wow. But I do think that there will be some key things that we need to have clarity on. Because keep in mind, if you know, and you're going to hear an update report on the SIA in a little bit, and you know that has really, there's been a lot more sharing with the community, gathering community feedback, posting on websites. And so I feel like we have an obligation to really be thoughtful in our edu-speak so that it doesn't land on, you know, so people can comprehend it. And everybody knows what we're talking about. We talk about the edu-speak, right? So my interest would be to have this crafted so that it is understandable. Am I going to worry about that for submission? No, I just need to get this across the finish line. But I do think over time, it's going to be centennial language. And I can speak to that. I can speak with confidence, like with SIA, they're not asking us to use this language or that language. It's more important that we're hitting the mark on the activity. So I think we'll have to do that work, I think, with you all and with some other key stakeholders. But I think over time it'll meld. That's my best answer tonight.
That's great. This looks like a ton of work. So just thank you for your dedication and commitment to seeing this through.
It is, I am actually I must just be an education geek because I'm loving this. So
Well, you're in the right place.
I'm also not alone. So, you know, this is really a collaborative effort with cabinet members, with Ad Council. And so we're all in this together. I'm just holding the water for us in these spaces.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let's pull back up the thing here that says what report is next. Ooh, excellent. We have Stacy Michelson joining us. James, would you like to do an introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So Stacy Michelson is here from East County. She is East County Government Affairs Administrator. And so she works for the school districts in East County. She is housed in MESD, but she works directly with Centennial and other East County school districts for the purpose of advocacy and legislative updates and things of that sort, so that we are connected with our local politicians, so that we're connected with what's happening at the local and state level. And with the legislature in session on the cusp of the 23-25 biennium, there's a lot happening at the state legislature that has to do with what we do here in Centennial. So we thought instead of me interpreting for everybody, it would be better if Stacy would just come and provide an update, because this is the work that she does. And she can provide information about what's happening with the legislature, and then also advocacy opportunities potentially as well. So hopefully that was a proper introduction, Stacy, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for your time with the board.
Yeah, thanks, Superintendent Owens. That was great. That is an excellent description of what I do and what I'm here for. I appreciate the time with you all tonight. I'll try to keep my remarks fairly brief and just leave plenty of time for questions and discussion. I am going to attempt to share screen, which I will admit I am not the best at. Okay, can everyone see that? Excellent. Excellent. So I'll start out by just saying these slides are a little bit out of date because I was submitting them to Melissa last week in time to get posted online, and things move quickly and change quickly in Salem. So I'll make some updates as we go. I will also mention that I did send over a couple of items that I won't belabor in my comments here, but there is a calendar that shows some of the legislative session deadlines and just gives a sense of pace and timeline and where we are in the process. There's also a document that sort of walks through just the legislative process in Oregon specifically, as well as some terms of art. I may reference some of those as I'm talking, so that may be a helpful reference if I say something that just doesn't quite land, but feel free to ask questions as well. So with that, I'll just jump right in here. So this first page is just sort of some quick numbers and highlights. Really what I want to point out here is that we have a lot of brand new legislators in Salem. 20 of the 90 are brand new. This is their first session ever. And then 6 legislators are serving their first long session. So essentially those would be folks who were either appointed or elected in between to fill the remainder of someone's term. So they may have served in the short session that we had in 2022, but this is the first time they've done the full gamut of February through June. Quick breakdown just of the parties in both chambers. The legislature convened on January 9th, and constitutionally, they have to wrap up by June 25th. So that is the target deadline that we are all working toward. In order to go past that date, they do have to go through some major procedural hoops. And since we have moved to having annual sessions with that short session in the even years, in recent memory, I can't think of a year when they have gone past that constitutional deadline. So really June 25th would be the end date. And they're aiming to be done hopefully a week before that. When I had submitted these slides, we had just over 2,300 bills that had been introduced. As of today, that was 2,585. Yesterday was the filing deadline for members to introduce measures. It typically takes a day or two for the paperwork to go through and for those bills to be officially introduced. So by the end of the week, we should start to see the number of new bills coming through the system really slow to a trickle. And I say a trickle because there are always caveats to the legislative process. Legislators are allowed typically 2 priority bills per member that they can use at their discretion throughout session, for issues that come up as things go on. But those bills are held pretty close and pretty dear, so they use them very judiciously. So this is just sort of a breakdown of the bills that I'm tracking on behalf of the districts in East County. This is not all of them, but these are some of the categories that are most relevant and the clearest. And so I just wanted to give sort of a quick sense. Personnel, that's typically going to be anything HR related, and that's not necessarily specific to K-12. So schools are schools. We are also employers, just as any other business or public agency is an employer. So that's going to encompass a variety of, wage, benefits, leave, just general employment labor issues. Workforce development as distinct from personnel, that's going to be a little bit more specific to K-12 for our purposes. So the bills that I'm tracking there are really about incentives for folks that would work in schools. So generally either scholarship or tax credit type programs, although not limited only to our teaching staff, but some of our related services and healthcare providers as well. General government, that's going to be anything from state procedure and how things happen at the state level to anything that would just impact a public body that may also have relevance for schools. The placeholder piece, that's one that I'll provide a little bit of context around because that's sort of unique to the legislative process. So those are bills that legislators will request when they don't actually know what they want to put in a bill yet. So they will get what we would generally refer to as a vehicle. So they'll have a bill that's drafted with very generic language that has a very broad, typically relating to clause. The relating to clause is what the bill is about. Different from at the federal level. In Oregon, you can only put something in a bill if it fits within the relating to clause. So typically within those placeholders, you'll see a lot of things like relating to education, relating to housing. There were a number of relating to housing bills that got introduced lately. So those are just bills that legislators have drafted. So they have something on hand that they can amend later if they come up with a new idea that they don't have a bill available to them, right, because of those deadlines. So those are a lot of bills that we're just kind of monitoring. I keep an eye on those to see if they happen to pop up for a hearing or a work session, which tells me, oh, someone has finally decided what they need to use that bill for. They're putting amendment language in. We should probably check to see if that has an impact on K-12. And then K-12 operations, that's going to be pretty much anything else that doesn't fit in neatly into one of these other categories that may impact district operations. And I will say a lot of those bills are going to be around finance and budget and things that would go through Paul in this instance. So as the legislature is considering all of these various bills that are out there, the foundational core issue to all of this is really about resources, right? Not only for our state school fund, but any other investments that we're talking about making. Is there enough money available to fund all of the things that we're talking about? Us meeting today is fortuitous timing. The state's quarterly revenue forecast just came out this morning. So I'll go through just sort of a quick update of where we stand as of this morning's projections relative to June of 2021 for the most part, because that June 21 revenue forecast was what was used as the basis for building the 21-23 budget. So we are up in general fund revenue 6.48 billion over June of 2021. So that's a really good sign. It shows that the economy continues to be, stronger than many folks anticipated, especially post-COVID. But that growth is, I will editorialize a little bit and say, unfortunately, mitigated by the personal kicker, which will be paid out in 2024 when folks are filing their 2023 taxes. And when I say paid out, that happens via a tax credit, right? But that personal kicker is projected to top 3.9 billion based on this morning's revenue forecast. So that's money that we don't get to keep in the state coffers, right? That's 3.9 billion that we would otherwise have to invest in all of those various packages and placeholders that folks want to push through. So when we factor that in, the general fund available for the 23-25 biennium is only actually predicted to grow by 1.7 billion over the amount that was spent in 21-23, right? So not necessarily looking at the amount of revenue, but what was our spending this year? What's our projected revenue for the coming biennium? Growth of about 1.7 billion. And that's the amount of flex or growth that we have to really encompass that current service roll up, not only for K-12, but many other agencies and programs as well. Now, my caveat to that is that I am talking specifically about general fund. Those aren't the only funds that the state has available, right? We do pull down a great deal of federal funds that support many of our agencies like the Health Authority and DHS specifically. There are also other sort of discrete tax sources, gas tax, for example, that's money the state would pull in that would not support K-12, does not go into the general fund. But that does just give you a sense of when we're talking about the general fund, sort of how much money the legislature has at its discretion. Because the general fund really is where they have the most discretion. Most of those other funding sources have dedicated purposes that they're tied to. But some that aren't necessarily tied up. So for example, the state does anticipate having an extra 860 million in discretionary lottery funds for 23-25. So that is some extra money that will help alleviate a little bit of that pressure as we look at current service level roll-ups. So specific to K-12, I want to talk a little bit about the corporate activities tax. So when we look at the CAT tax specifically, revenue for this biennium is actually up 82.7 million over what was anticipated when we built the budget in June of 2021. And when we look at growth projected into 23-25, we're expecting to see an additional 222 million in CAT revenue. Based on the formula that is in statute for how those corporate activity tax dollars get dispersed, that would equate to roughly 150 million increase in the student investment account specifically. So that's a decent bump. The CAT's been sort of all over the place with how robustly folks are anticipating it to grow, but 150 million in that SIA is nothing to sneeze at. So keep those revenue numbers in mind as we look at this state school fund chunk specifically. So in 21-23, the state school fund was funded at 9.3 billion. The state's initial calculation for current service level, which again is that, what does it cost us next biennium to do everything we're doing this biennium, not talking about investments, just literally maintain service level. So the state's calculation was 9.52 billion. That is a roughly 2.36% increase, which if you talk with many districts across the region, they will tell you their costs are not going up 2.36%. And so that's largely a difference of some of the inputs that are used when calculating that roll up. And I'll talk about that in just a moment, but 9.52 was the state's initial suggested CSL. The governor actually funded K-12 at 9.9 billion in her recommended budget, which of course the legislature is not beholden to. School business officials across the state have calculated the numbers based on, actual contract costs, actual non-personnel salary or supply increase percentages that folks are looking at. And the number that the school business officials have said we need to avoid cuts for most districts in the state is 10.3 billion. So as we look at that revenue forecast from this morning and say, okay, great, we're projected to grow by 1.7 billion. We as K-12 would like an additional 400 million of that, please and thank you, to fully fund the state school fund. That is the amount that we need to avoid cuts for most districts. But it does make that argument, a little bit harder with legislators because they do have limited resources that they're working with at the state level to fund all program budgets. So then I just wanted to hit on a couple of what I'm calling hot topics for the purpose of this slide. This is not meant to be a comprehensive list of everything that's out there. These are really mostly the bills that have either already come up for a hearing, have hearings in the near future, or there are a couple that really are just a hot topic, and I'll point those out. So on the funding piece, we do have legislation that's been introduced that would require the state to work with K-12 when developing that CSL calculation to try to get at that issue of the state has their number and school business officials say it's a different number. We would love to be able to come together and at least agree on what it would take to avoid cuts in schools. That doesn't guarantee that the legislature has the money to fund us at that level, but it would help us to all understand, what the numbers are and what the math is, and make sure that we're in agreement on that. There are a couple of proposals out there that would impact revenue potentially if they do happen to get legs. I don't anticipate that they will, but I will also say I've been surprised that they've gotten hearings this early in session. So there is one bill that would redistribute marijuana tax revenue primarily back to cities and counties after the implementation of ballot measure 110. A lot of the money that was going to cities and counties has been redirected. So K-12 would get caught up in that, and we would lose about 40 million in marijuana tax revenue out of the state school fund if that passed. There are a number of bills proposing changes to the corporate activities tax, typically piecemeal exemptions saying, carve out this specific type of sale. We shouldn't have to pay the CAT. There are a couple of bills that talk about raising the threshold for when a business would have to pay that corporate activities tax. Those are the ones I could see potentially getting legs if Democrats, just based on the conversations that I heard in committee, they have typically said, you know, we would consider raising the threshold as long as we can do it in a way that is revenue neutral. So if we raise the threshold for small businesses, that means we have to up the rate for other folks and some of those higher payers. So that remains to be seen, but those are some of the conversations happening out there. There's a bill that's up for a hearing next week that would require school districts to do some reporting on your annual state school fund distributions, and that would be distinct from your general operating budget. So that, you know, is information that is technically all public record, but it would be asking for a report that the districts don't already have or provide. So it would be a bit of a heavy lift for our business offices to try to extrapolate that data in that particular way. There is a proposal around early literacy investments. This generally comes from Stand for Children. They were funded in the governor's budget at roughly 120 million, with 100 million going toward coaching and training and professional development for teachers to be able to teach the science of reading. And 20 million would be for high intensity summer learning, specifically around early literacy. That bill has not yet been scheduled for a hearing, but I think it is going to gain a lot of attention this session. Senator Dembro, who is the chair of the House Education Committee, has a very large workforce package that he spent a lot of time over the summer working on, pulling a group together. A couple of our superintendents from this region sat on various committees as part of that workforce package. It's a bill that's going to include a lot. Happy to talk about this more, but high level, some data systems to track the number of educators we have in the system in Oregon, some really great investments in grow your own, mentorship and apprenticeship, increased ability for folks to work back after they've retired, and ease of becoming subs and working as subs post-retirement. There's also a great proposal around a 20% salary differential for our SPED staff, because we know there's a really hard, you know, districts are struggling to retain folks. Those are hard positions. That is a great policy proposal. There's no money attached to that idea of paying 20% more for those folks. So that's a little bit of a struggle. And then there's also a requirement in that bill for minimum hours for classified staff, and the substitute teachers would need to be employees of the school districts. And I know that one is causing a lot of angst in our region, just in terms of the potential impact that would have on the ability to get subs, the ability to afford subs, and how that would impact students. Special education and wraparound support, Senate Bill 819, I will call out because it is getting a lot of attention. That would make changes to the IEP process for students who are on abbreviated school days. It would essentially sort of shift. Right now, the dynamic in terms of sort of due process is that if a parent disagrees with the IEP decision and placement of the district, it's on the parent to go through that iterative complaint process and review process. This would shift the process so that parents are able to essentially say, you know, I don't consent to my student being placed on an abbreviated day. And then the onus would be on the district to sort of initiate that due process if they wanted to challenge that. That bill is going to be amended likely next week. I am still working through the latest round of amendments to pull out some of the changes, and I'll be sharing that with our superintendent shortly. But it would also make some changes to sort of the timeline for, you know, how that would work when a parent perhaps does not consent to an abbreviated school day, the need to make sure their students get back into a school standard classroom quickly within a short turnaround, and some specific requirements around reporting and review of students who are on abbreviated school days. My sense is that bill will have a minimal impact in our region, but it does, you know, set some precedent for changes to the overall IEP process that I know a lot of our student services directors are paying really close attention to. A number of bills talking about behavioral health support for students. A lot of folks have really taken to heart that our students are struggling post-pandemic. So we've seen a number of bills with lots of great ideas for supports that should exist in schools for students. Not a lot of funding associated with those requests. So those would potentially become unfunded mandates, and they may die in the process just because there's not a lot of money to go around. I'll run through these really quickly. A few bills around facilities, I won't belabor them, but there's some talk of requiring corporate kicker dollars to be used to fund facilities, facilities grants, particularly for districts that struggle to pass bonds. There's talk of doubling the awesome grants, awesome bond matching grants, which would be a big win for a lot of our districts. And then there are a few things that have come up around safety alarms, HVAC assessments, integrated pest management protocols. So, you know, the pesticides and whatnot that folks are spraying on campuses. Some of those are being modified where they would be a little bit more permissive or give districts some opt-out ability. But absent that, they also pose the potential for unfunded mandates on districts. And then the last one I'll just close with, there are a couple of bills around public records. That's not specific to K-12, but could potentially have a major financial impact as they're talking about fee reductions of up to about 40% for public records requests, as long as they are in the public interest, which is defined very, very broadly. So that is something for districts to just be, you know, paying attention to and mindful of staff capacity and how you might navigate those public records requests if you had to charge reduced fees. There will be a massive housing package. Again, I mentioned all those placeholders that are coming through. We have heard from legislative leadership, they are hoping to have that done and put together and passed out of the budget committees by the end of March. I have not seen or heard exactly what they are deciding is going to go into that package. But that is one of the major priorities, and we've heard pretty loud and clear that they will finish that package before they move on to thinking about any of the other budgets. So we won't really have a good sense of where we're at with legislators with regard to the state school fund until after that housing package is put together and passed out. With that, I'm not quite sure how long I've taken, but I will stop and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Stacy. This was super helpful to get really a grounding understanding of what is going on. I'd love to open it up to folks that have questions, and I will be looking for hands on Zoom. David, Director Lynn, please.
Yeah, I believe I had heard something earlier in the session about giving us more weighted funding for the issues that we're dealing with here in East County in terms of poverty, homelessness, foster youth. Can you speak to anything like that or any bills that are kind of specific to the challenges that we're dealing with here in East County that are not statewide?
Sure, Director Lynn. I think my short answer is, in recent years, there has been a lot of interest in talking about that weight formula. It has not gained a lot of traction in a broad sense with legislators. There have been work groups pulled together and folks that have tried to do really good work on that. I think that is an especially challenging conversation to have when we may be looking at a cuts budget. Because absent additional resources, any shifting of the weights is sort of a zero-sum game where some will benefit and some will lose. So I have not seen any bills specific to that this session that seem viable. And I'm happy to let you know if that changes. But I think what is more likely is that you may see some discrete investments in the types of issues that impact our districts in East County, rather than changes to the weights.
Thank you. Looking for hands. Oh, yes. Looks like, I don't know who was first. Director Shields.
Oh, just a quick question about, this is crystal ball question, okay? Digging into the corporate kicker with us underneath your facilities bullet, just, God, if we could get a foothold anywhere into that kicker for use for educational purposes, that sounds like a wonderful thing. But what are your thoughts about what happens with our kicker?
Sure, Director Shields. So the personal kicker, I think, is a very hard nut to crack. Right? We as Oregonians love our kicker, even if we recognize it poses challenges at the state level. The corporate kicker actually is dedicated to K-12 funding, but what typically happens is the legislature will put that money into the state school fund and then back out general fund.
Right.
That was not the intent when that was put into place. But there's not a lot of statutory language that prevents that. So there is one proposal that would try to add clarity to how the corporate kicker is used in education. And I have this specifically under facilities because there are a couple of proposals that are suggesting we should use the corporate kicker money specifically for facilities grants for districts, given that, you know, the corporate kicker is a little bit less predictable. So the idea would be what's there is there, and, you know, you may have a certain pot of money available for grants in any given year. But when you have districts who are struggling to pass bonds and need facilities support, that money would be there. I'm not sure if that will actually make it through the process, but it is a bipartisan bill, so we'll see.
Superintendent Owens?
Stacy, I had a question about the Awesome Grants. I believe you said that they were doubling. Do you know if that's a doubling of the value of a grant or a doubling of the pot with which to divvy grants up?
Yes, thank you. That is a good question. I am trying to remember what I saw in those amendments. I believe it is a doubling of the pot and an increase in the amount available. So I think we go from a minimum of 4 million to a minimum of 6 million, a maximum of 8 million to a maximum of 12. Don't hold me to those numbers, but I think that was it. And then there were a few tweaks to the percentage available, you know, based on priority versus first-time districts.
Thank you.
Stacy, this is my first time on a board going through this legislative process. So I had a question about something in the workforce package. When we talk about data systems needed, is that a system? Does the state kind of create a data system and then provide it to all the districts, or are all the districts expected just to come up with a data system on their own that then maybe the state as a whole can't even really aggregate the data?
Sure, that's a great question, Chair Solowski. This is actually talking about a statewide data system.
Great.
Where, you know, essentially that the state would have the ability to really wrap their arms around how many licensed educators do we have, where are they, when, you know, how often are they leaving the workforce, at what point in their career. I believe it would also require some exit surveys so that we try to collect some data about why folks are leaving the teaching profession. I'm sure many of you in this space have some pretty accurate hunches about why that might be the case, but
Great,
that's
thank you.
what's being talked about. Yeah.
That's helpful. Anyone else? Seeing any hands? I'm scrolling through my Zoom cameras, making sure I'm not missing, or my Zoom screens, making sure I'm not missing anyone. All right. Thank you so much, Stacy.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Sorry, Superintendent Owens, I think I went a little over time, but happy to answer questions anytime folks have them, or come back later in session if that's useful.
Great update. Thanks for providing it.
Thanks. I'll hang around and listen for a bit, but I am going to turn my video off.
You're fine. Director or Superintendent Owens, would you like to introduce the next one?
All right, moving us along here, we have a student investment account audit report, and Director Callahan will take the lead with Director Southerton supporting as well. This is an annual requirement with the Student Success Act for us to provide an annual report about how that is going, how the money's being expended, and our learnings throughout the process. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Director Callahan to lead us through.
Thank you, Superintendent Owens. Yes, so this is really a comprehensive report of what's happened the last 2 years and what are we doing this year. As we get closer to the end and what we're doing this year, this really also is a collaborative effort in that we've got there's many of us in cabinet who have oversight of programs. And so if there are specific questions to a specific program, I'll invite other directors to join in. So the first several slides are really a review of the requirements, and they may look familiar because they are the same ones that I used last year. This is the Student Success Act. You'll also hear me use the term SIA or Student Investment Account. I really use them. Mostly I use SIA because that's a lot of the language I see as I report. So bear with me on that one. So just as a reminder, the Student Success Act really, it focuses, it's our commitment to improving both access and opportunity for students who have been historically underserved in the educational system. It's focused on mental and behavioral health needs, as well as increasing academic achievements for students, while also reducing academic disparities. I think you'll also hear this evening as I go through this, you'll start to hear things that Lauren and I talked about earlier. And so this very much lines up with that. This is a diagram of the 3 years using the SIA funds. The strategies, there are 5 strategies, and the descriptors are described there. And you can see the amounts across the 3 years. So year 3 is this year, and we'll get into more details about how that's how those resources are spent. But they all align up to the 5 strategies. Overall engagement. This is a list of activities that we've used in the past to engage community. And I have to say, as I move on, we'll talk about themes of other areas that are surfacing, but the level of engagement through our strategic planning process really enhances what we've done in the past in ways that I believe are going to really build community. So in the past, and when I say past, I mean these 3 years, these were some of the themes that we have been creating activities around. These themes surfaced originally in the spring of 2020 with various family engagement groups, with educators, just really trying to understand what we needed. The current themes on the right are really a list of themes that are surfacing through our strategic planning process. One thing to just note is that this is neither a completed list or refined or approved. These are themes that I've noticed that are surfacing and that I thought might be interesting to see just in terms of the development on how we're evolving as a district. So also I will say, we also will use what the process from this year to inform the SIA process, which of course we already talked about the integrated piece. So just a note about this year, all of our strategies line up with our current strategic plan, our Destination 2023. That will sunset this year, and we will roll into the new plan for the fall of 2023. But I think the big idea here is all of our activities and actions line up with these 4 pillars. Let's see. So again, here are the stated purposes for the student investment account. And as I mentioned earlier, the overarching goals are those 4 areas that I had shared after Lauren had presented: equity advanced, well-rounded education, high levels of community engagement, and strengthening our systems and capacities on behalf of all of our students. And again, it goes beyond the academics, and it includes student health, mental health, behavioral health. So now we start to move into looking at the actual, how we're using the dollars. So if you look at year 3, let me see my notes here for a second. The column on the right, that they are our activities for this year, keeping in mind that this year we maintain year 1 and year 2 activities unless the activity has been completed. And there are a couple, not a lot, but that end up kind of falling off. But for the most part, everything continues to roll forward. Last year, it was, I don't remember the exact time of the year, sometime early spring, There were additional funds in year 2, and it allowed us to identify some one-time spending and in the areas of curriculum and assessment materials, enhancing electives specifically for secondary schools, and integrating strategic planning process. So those one-time dollars have really allowed us to do make some quality moves around curriculum instruction and for, especially with the integrated planning. So it's pretty exciting. And then year 3, and we'll talk more about some of these activities, but you can see summer programming, weighted class size reduction, after school programming. Again, that the equity audit piece is enhancing our strategic planning, and we were able to fund that as well. And then additional staff hiring to support academic and social emotional wellness. We'll get into more details in just a second. So these next 2 slides are divided into 2 groups. This is the staffing slide. So you can see the additional staff that we added because of the student investment account. And if you think about the goals and the drivers, it definitely it's targeting our students in both academics, social, emotional wellness. The next one is more the services, the programs, and the materials for this year. And again, I talked a little bit about the strategic planning, and that we've been, because of this, able to include the equity audit piece with that, increased family engagement. Albert has done an incredible job really casting a wide net, I think, for our community, and really providing opportunities and accesses that are helping connect. So the added weighted class size reduction to address targeted needs. Any questions about that? I'll defer to Paul. And then, of course, we have additional funds for summer programming. We talked about that at the last board meeting, that's a combined with 1 or 2 other funding buckets for that. We're still implementing the super sensory spaces, and really right now that's about our instructors honing their practice around that. The dual language immersion committee to consider possibilities. That is something that we had hopes for this year, and quite honestly, just haven't had the bandwidth that we had hoped for to really get that off the ground. Sonia and I have talked through that, and we've done some minor steps around that, but not to the extent that I think either of us are satisfied. Professional development, a lot of job embedded professional development, specifically around culturally responsive pedagogy. And we'll talk more about that in terms of the specifics. And then curriculum department, summer collaborative planning, that's really doing some of the alignment work with curriculum in terms of from grade to grade, vertical and horizontal. There are additional funds for Grow Your Own Teacher Pathways as well, and that's also matched with the grant, I don't remember the number, for growing teacher pathways. So they're the services, programs, and materials. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the evidence of impact. That is something that we are asked to report on, and in more of a narrative. So these are journal entries on what we see as the evidence of impact. This is a sampling. There are a lot more evidence of impact. We would be here for a very long time if we concluded all of it, but we'll continue to build our practices and our processes to do that, to make sure that we can track these. But the implementation of SIA has really provided us the opportunity to focus on essential elements of effective learning. From the design and implementation, we see the full implementation of Virtual Academy academic program K-12. We continue to see students benefit from sensory rooms, which are empowering them to monitor themselves. There are a number of staff supports that are providing learning opportunities related to instruction. Those supports center around social emotional learning, equity, instructional processes known as universal design for learning, restorative practices, and all staff have access to those. In addition, our community communication processes continue to be focused on families, and we're able to cast a wider net, reaching families through various means of communication. Some of the barriers or challenges, I'm happy and relieved to say that these aren't near as impactful as they were when I reported last year. Some of these are still at play occasionally, they pop up. But what I have noticed is that the frequency is lessening, and our ability to navigate through them, we're able to do that. And so there's less, I would say less negative impact based on those challenges, but they are still there. So I felt like it was important for you to know that. Anecdotal successes, let me find where I'm at here. We also have to report that to the state. And so what I'd like to do, let me see if I can find this. There's some cool just anecdotal stories that I'll just read to you. And then if you have more specific questions, we can, let's see, I think I'm almost done. Yep, this is really the last slide. So related to social workers, these are all active, either staffing or activities through the SIA funding. This has been a huge help with with our families with intensive needs. Having someone to facilitate resources and communication has made such a difference. They are a critical part of us moving forward. And so these are all quotes that I was able to collect anecdotally. Regarding our assistant principals, elementary assistant principals have allowed these schools to take a more proactive approach as it relates to MTSS, the climate and culture of the building, and addressing student behavior. The overall school systems allow for increased instructional leadership, coaching, and support of classrooms and educators. Related to communication, Albert has brought an outreach, brought an outreach to supporting community engagement efforts through our strategic planning process, family and community forums, including the coordination and translation support and targeted engagement with families from historically disadvantaged backgrounds. He also continues to reach out building to building to really to find out what's happening in buildings and so that we can spotlight that in the community. Responsive classroom implementation. Morning meetings start every day off in a positive and joyful and structured way. The strategies students learn help improve their social and emotional learning and teach them to handle situations which they might not know how to navigate just yet. Let's see here. Oh, virtual program. Centennial Virtual Academy has built this foundation in effort to further redefine the paradigm of education access for students. Small but mighty, a staff of approximately 11, classified and certified, currently serve over 300 students K-12. CVA serves accelerated learners, those credit deficient, and students who prefer an alternate setting to their education experience. Providing this avenue to student learning makes CVA unique and an innovation incubator for the student learners at Centennial School District. Just have a couple more. Counselors. The addition of the school counselor position has allowed us to have a counselor per grade at Centennial Middle School and 2 counselors at Oliver Middle School, bringing us closer to the 250-to-1 recommended ratio, which increases the effectiveness and response time between students and staff. And then I added focused leadership, which has really allowed administrators who are providing oversight of these programs, but also our leadership in buildings has really allowed them to become more focused on education compared to the past couple years. And so I think those are some of the anecdotal successes through the SIA. But I also want to give you an opportunity to ask any clarifying questions, and if it's specific to a program, we'll connect up with our other directors.
Thank you so very much for that overview. Looking for hands for questions. Director Shields and then Director Arden.
Couple of questions, or I guess maybe questions about opportunities. We see the emphasis on, and on this slide in particular, increased collaboration with community organizations and connection and engagement with our community, which is also what we're doing in our strategic planning as well. So if we, again, are we going to, I'm going to go back to one of the things about one of the pillars where it says we can't do it alone, right? We've engaged now people in a process for strat planning in particular, and then we've engaged ourselves as a district in the SIA. How do we continue to keep those people, especially outside of our, our schools, engaged? And then I look at the, I think your previous slide had where it talked about job embeddedness and things of that nature. We have these we've got individuals out here who have said they're interested and they want to do and have, right, come forward. How do we provide opportunities for them to keep engaged? Right? Because they're already a mind, we've mined them as a resource, but how now do we implement that and say, okay, you've done a lot for us in terms of setting the goals, and now let's talk about how you're that bridge. You can help us provide the jobs. You can help us by coming into the schools and doing these various things. If we don't have a plan for them to step up to, they won't step up. And just because we have it as a bulleted item, I want to know where the bridge is, that they can clearly see that they can cross over from, hey, I just started being involved with this district now. This is my next step. They can't do it alone.
Albert, do you want to
Sure.
get us started?
So, Director Shields, I can actually tell you a little bit some of the systems that we've actually started to implement as far as outreach and engagement. Myself and Superintendent Owens have been attending a couple of events that have been district-wide, like the chamber events, this particular weekend, community event at with one of our community partners, and then doing intentional outreach and follow up with a lot of the folks that I meet myself, and make sure that I see what type of services the district can benefit, what type of partnerships we can benefit from there, and being very intentional more than anything with the follow-ups. I know that I met a couple of nonprofit groups this weekend that were already in partnership with Park Lane and with Jorge Mesa, and they were telling me about the great things they were doing. They had not heard about me or anything in connection with the district. So I wanted to make sure that that disconnect was more than anything established. And I told them, hey, give me a call. This is what I do. This is how I want you to help us. And thank you for what you're already doing right now. So these are some of the steps that I'm trying to more than anything establish. And then moving forward, set up a system and take it from there. And then also with Superintendent Owens' assistant and guidance from that.
I'd like to weigh in on that question as well. I think it's multifaceted. It's a good question to Vice Chair Shields. The first thought I have with regard to that is making sure that we are making explicit and visual our strategic planning process going forward in terms of presenting to various groups. I know when we have the alignment team, which was comprised of the heads of various organizations that we currently partner with, one of the things that we talked about at the end of the final meeting was, how do we carry this forward? And so one of the things that they were interested in was seeing how the final plan turned out, because another element that we've created this fall is partnership inventory, and that's a living type document where you're going to continually add, subtract partnerships as you develop them. We've made attempts at that before, and I think this is the closest we've had to having something comprehensive. What that will allow is for us to do a gap analysis of what is it that we are hoping to get support with, and where are there providers, and where can we make matches. The other thing I would offer as well is that we currently have quite a number of community partnerships that we work with both at the school and the district level. And I don't know, I know Director Wright has been probably processing this question as well. She personally manages 40 plus of our partnerships herself for the district as well. So I think she might have some ideas, not to put you on the spot though, Denise.
You can always put me on the spot. So we have an amazing amount of partners, and I think sometimes it's underlooked because there's so much work that partners are doing. And like Albert was sharing, that there's partners doing work on the ground in our buildings, but they may not be connected with us specifically or with someone else, but they're there on site. And this last 2 weeks is a perfect example that we have a new partnership starting at the high school with Medicine Bear Collective, and they're doing affinity work, family work, and creating a mural at the high school. And this is a brand new partner, and they sought our district out specifically because they wanted to be in East County. They know that families are here, students are here, and so that's an amazing opportunity. We have a skateboarding group that has, you know, through contacts of contacts, they were able to connect with the high school and both the middle schools this last week. So partnerships evolve, and, you know, folks are reaching out to us. And I think a big part of the conversation we've had is how can those partnerships be mutually beneficial? Because as a district, it's often easy to say we have holes, we need supports, we have these places we need to fill, and having to be really conscientious that what is it that partners are needing from us. And so I think there's still a lot of work in progress. We've had, you know, great attendance through this process, and we've had previously really strong partnerships. So I think we can only grow and do better, and especially being really strategic about where are the needs and how do we build up those needed areas versus just kind of collaborating and grabbing anybody who comes along. So more work to be done. And I think we're really, really, really fortunate for the partnerships that we do have.
Mo, did you want to weigh, Director Callahan, did you want to weigh in on that one before we move on?
I just wanted to add that in terms of your question, that is one of those things that we need to have a plan on. That's one of those 4 big areas: engaged community and effective engagement, or evidence of engagement. So we've got to think about what that's going to look like over the next 4 years to enhance that quality. And I know that that's a real interest for us.
Director Harden, oh, go ahead.
I just may have followed through with that, just in that. Okay, so we've got it going, which is perfect. Good. We're going to keep it going. That makes sense. I would like for us to look, and Jess, I'm talking to you as well, a little bit longer term. And that is, we will be re-engaging with the facilities planning, right? Because our bond did not cover all of our needs. And so that's a perfect opportunity for connecting with our community, right? In terms of them being able to give us feedback about what is necessary in our facilities, which could enhance this give and take between us and the organizations that we involve ourselves in. And I'm looking at the outcome in another, what'd you tell me, Director Southerton? You know, a plan for 5 years out, where we have to start, you know, building up for the Yes for Centennial Kids PAC involvement, things of that nature, so that we do not look like we're just coming with hands, you know, open with, we need you, when we haven't been talking to them all the way along. That happened to us in 2016, probably had a negative impact to a degree. We were much better because of the facilities planning and the preparation that was done for the 2020 bond. I think we could be even much better prepared, right? Because of what you guys have been doing now in strat planning and the internal workings of these programs that we're needing to report to. I think if we continue to think that, one more step ahead, budget wise, facilities wise, that we are engaging these people because of this relationship, a shared relationship, and they will more easily see themselves as a partner in helping us send our message to the wider community when we have to, when we just start looking through a bond, the eyes of a bond. So, having gone through this several years in a row, I'm really intent. I know Jess is too, because he's lived it through both of the other ones, that we cultivate those kind of things in mind. So our community is like, absolutely, we've seen the need, we've been in your buildings, we understand what's going on. We want to be with you and we want to continue to support you. And we can do that by money, people, services, et cetera, for the bond. So just know that that's kind of way the
Thank you.
background between my question.
Before we get to your question, Director Harden, and I did have a follow-up on that partnership inventory, and I'm just curious, how are you going about finding all of the partnerships that each individual school is working with and navigating on their own? It sounded like, Albert, you had said that you ran into someone, right? But I know just this week I saw CTC students using our gym, right? And so is that something that, like, is there in this partnership inventory, how are you reaching out to all of the different schools trying to capture things without also trying to take them over from the schools, right? Because I think that that's definitely probably a concern for the schools as well.
Yeah, and what we have is in a Google Doc, and so we can share it with principals and make sure that they have added the partnerships in the appropriate category. What we've basically done is categorize just general categories of what the partnership might entail and what their focus might be. And then the schools are able to populate theirs in there as well, which is helpful also because we want to be a school district, not a district of individual schools. And where pockets of innovation are helpful, at the same time, there may be a partnership that Powell Butte is doing that all of our schools should be partnering with as well. We just had one recently, which was reading results, which Powell Butte or Meadows was doing. Now Powell Butte has learned about it. Well, we should all know about that, because if that's a valuable partnership, then hopefully we can extend that out to all of our schools as well. I don't know if that helps address your question. Yeah.
Sorry, I muted myself. Go ahead, Director Harden.
Yeah, my question, the talk of growing partnerships is fantastic. I always like hearing about that and evolving that conversation. That's great. My question was about growing our own teacher, the Grow Your Own Teacher pathway. Can you speak to, are we part of this program currently? Are we trying to be part of the program? I'm always a big fan of that. And is there kind of on top of that, is there other grow your own, programs that we can use for librarians, for food service workers, for not just specifically for teachers?
Good question. And this is squarely in Dr. Katsuta's wheelhouse. So we'll let her get in here.
Yeah. Yes, we are part of the Grow Your Own consortium efforts across Multnomah County. In addition to that, we've received additional funding, which has supported much more involved recruitment, hiring, and retention planning across classified and licensed, both classified and licensed groups. In terms of supporting staff in the specific kinds of positions you described, I would say right now we're providing information to quite a few staff in terms of opportunities for professional advancement. So if they're in a classified position and they have interest in being a licensed employee and getting their teaching license, there are some opportunities for that, particularly if you're multilingual staff member of color, that kind of thing, right? So yes, on all fronts, and there's always more room to consider the effectiveness of our plan. This is a very complex issue that has complex solutions, not easy solutions. And so even though we have some funding that we've applied for and received, it's, all along the way, it involves us reflecting and improving and thinking about the effectiveness of our efforts. So, but yes, to your questions.
Can you speak to, if I'm a classified employee and I have an interest in becoming a teacher, what are some of the supports I might be able to access?
Perfect. Yes, thank you. Words right out of my mouth. So as we partner with MESD, some of the services provided include free tuition, or I should say free tuition, paid courses. They provide tuition for staff of color who want to enter into the teaching profession. And that includes supports for any of the materials they need, books and so forth, and guidance and counseling and supports, advisory supports as they need it, because the systems are pretty mystified. So they have some coaching and some guidance and counseling along the way to support them in completing programs. So, and in addition to that, if you're a teacher, particularly a teacher of colors, we're trying to diversify our workforce. There are quite a few opportunities for you if you're interested in being an administrator. And so one of the programs actually provides funding to pay for the entire administrative licensure program if you're a teacher of color and you want to be a school administrator. So.
Wow, thanks for those updates.
Yeah, that's great. Thank
Thanks.
you.
I had one other simple, small question.
Go for it.
I'm pretty good with my acronyms, but what's MTSS coach?
Multi-tiered systems of support.
Okay, all right.
Give this girl a prize.
The concept, just to expand on that, I was going to draw it on my paper. I decided not to, but the whole concept of a green zone, yellow zone, red zone. So, 80% of students in a system should be able to access core supports without additional core instruction without additional support. But you also have an additional 20% of students who may need intensification of the core programming. So that would look like interventions for reading, interventions for maybe behavioral support, and in the red zone, maybe more intensive interventions. So the idea is green zone would be strong core instruction that's provided by the teacher for all students. Yellow zone would be supports and intervention for groups of students. And then red zone would be supports and interventions tailored to individual students. So when you talk about MTSS on a whole, it's helping to organize the system at the district and school level around, first and foremost, making sure that the core instruction that's being provided in the classroom is meeting the needs of as many students as possible. If you don't have that, and I don't want to belabor this, I'll make it quick, but if you don't have that and your core instruction is meeting the needs of, say, 50% of your students, that means 50% of your students need interventions. And then you're just basically playing whack-a-mole because you are trying to do way too much plugging and not enough in your core programming. So a big tenet of your MTSS system is not necessarily just in providing interventions, it's in providing strong core programming so that the need to intervene is lessened. Denise, how did I do? She oversees it, that's why I asked.
Right. Yeah. So we are using tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 language. Kind of the red, green, yellow is kind of transitioning out, but you hit it on the spot, James. So, and this is an opportunity James had spoken to, having a school district versus a district of school. And so the MTSS coach is working across our system to ensure that the expectations that we have in place for all building teaming is similar. There's variations, but they're using the same practices and they're following the same protocols and they're accessing data in the same ways to increase that alignment across our systems.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Director Stanley, do you have a question?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, if that would be all right.
Yes.
So as someone who spends a huge chunk of her life in a district who shall not be named, sometimes I don't think we say enough positive things. And these reports have been great because Centennial is known for supporting its teachers from within and its administrators from within. So I just think that you need a little bit of kudos there. And the reports about how we're working with students and how we're working with community members and those pieces of information are wonderful to hear. And I think you guys need to hear that you're known for that. So thank you for those beautiful reports.
Thank you, Director Stanley. Before we move on, I did have one question. And that was when we were looking at the services, programs, and materials. One thing that it said was after school programming at the elementary school level. And I was curious what that potentially looked like. Did that look like anything outside of Sun?
I don't have a lot of insight into that. I don't know, if anybody else does. I know it's
Yeah.
happening. I just don't know the specifics.
I understand it is supplementing some of the Sun support, and there's some other elements of that that are needing to be considered as we go forward, just based on the county budget for being able to support Sun going forward. And that's something we might need to look at funding wise, either advocacy wise from the county or looking at absorbing some of that cost ourselves as well.
And then do we know if any of those programs are at the sites that don't have Sun? So for example, the ones that have I forget the
Champions.
name of it.
Champions.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's something that's good. That's on my radar, and that's something that was actually on my Mo list for the next time. Here's a preview, Mo, for the next time we meet. Is there's been an appetite for having Sun programming through all of our elementary schools. I need to get a little bit more information about what some of the obstacles and barriers are to being able to provide that, because I think it would be beneficial just on a whole and on concept for us to be able to provide free support for students throughout our district, regardless of what elementary school they attend. Because as we know, you and I, and maybe not everybody, Champions is a for-charge organization. And so it has its natural barriers to being able to participate simply because of that. They do offer some sponsorships, but not to the degree that I think that there's an appetite for the programming.
And just in my personal experience, their staff are not district employees. Is that correct?
For Champions or for
Yes.
Sun?
For Champions.
They're not. They're a
So
partnership.
there's definitely been different fluctuations in quality of staff. As someone who had my own kids go through Champions. And so that's, I mean, it's definitely something that I'm interested in being part of that conversation too. Seeing what
No,
we can
good.
do.
And not to carry this on too much farther, if it's unnecessary, but I'd also add that Sun employees are not necessarily district employees, although they can be, and they often attempt to hire district employees for the after-school programming. So there's a pretty tight alignment. And the Sun coordinator will work at the school during the day, even though they may be employed by MFS or another organization. They will work in the school throughout the day and then provide the programming. So there's a high degree of alignment with the partnership there.
Great. Director Stanley, your hand is still up. Did you have another thing you'd like to add? Nope. Okay, totally fine. Excuse me, Director Shields.
Just, I went back, I was writing notes. And so Mo, this is probably back on you again. It's the slide with barriers or challenges to SIA implementation. Last bullet, people capacity to commit to actions beyond the immediate scope of their work. I guess help me, just give me a little bit more.
Yep. So much of what we do with our staff, certified and classified, and I think they're still recovering from being exhausted. And so there's not an appetite to participate in a math adoption committee, to participate in educator effectiveness, and so on and so forth.
Great conversation, everybody. But I think we should probably move it along for the sake of time. Let's see, which report is up next? Oh, Director Southerton. James,
Great. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I can queue it up. Are people good, or do they, sorry, Chair, do people need a couple minutes, or do we want to just plow through? Plow through? I saw the plow through signal. That's what that means. All right. So Director Southerton is going to provide an update as far as where, as to where we are with the stadium improvement complex. He'll provide an update in terms of where we are relative to planning, pre-construction, and then also some funding considerations for us to think about as well. So Director Southerton, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent Owens. Let me share my screen here. All right. And if I can get a thumbs up, you can see that. Be fantastic. Great. Good to be back here with you all again tonight to provide you an update on the CHS field and stadium improvements. So as you'll recall, we embarked on a process earlier in the year to develop a master plan, which would be the highest and best use of the facilities that are available at the Centennial High School complex. And the master plan proposed the plan that you're seeing on your screen right here, with divided in 3 different phases that can be kind of tackled over time as resources and need are available. We are proceeding with phase 1, which was approved by the board. And phase 1 includes the all-weather turf field, multi-sport, so supporting soccer and supporting football, supporting physical education or PE classes, and supporting various other programs. We'll also be resurfacing the track as a bond project at the time, and we'll be supplementing district-wide pupil transportation facilities since part of the funding for this project came from selling of the auxiliary bus lot. We're proposing funding, or we proposed, and it was approved to have additional bus parking as part of this phase. So this is a largely a non-bond funded project, which includes the field, the stadium seismic improvements, updates to the stadium bathrooms, updates to the stadium team rooms, and then the district-wide school bus facilities that I spoke about. And these are the various amounts that were approved by the board. We do have the one bond scope item that we'll be tackling at the end of this project, which is replacing the track. So we'll be doing that after the turf field is done, so it's not damaged by construction. The new track is not damaged by construction, and then we'll be able to unveil the full facilities to everybody at that time. So the non-bond funded scope of the work is funded by the board reserve account, which is largely funded by the sale of surplus property. The last most recent sale of surplus property was the undeveloped land at Butler Creek in the auxiliary bus lot that I spoke about earlier. Other sources that we explored for supplemental funding or funding in addition or outside of the board reserve account were ESSER funds, or the American Rescue Plan funds. We explored that opportunity, and it was unlikely to be approved by the Oregon Department of Education. We also are exploring sponsorship and advertising opportunities. Principal Marin is on the call tonight, and Marin Miller from the high school, and we are working on various possibilities for advertising in the gyms and on the complex. And then fundraising was explored as well, and that will likely be needed for phases 2 and phase 3, but will not arrive in time for phase 1, which begins construction in May. Our partners on the project are RNC Management, our current owner's representative for construction projects in the district, Robertson Engineers, there are designers and engineers, Emmerich Construction, there are construction management and general contractor for the project, and then the National Guard Innovative Readiness Training Program, or RT program. They will be removing the 9,000 cubic yards of dirt that's currently on the football field, the grass field, and then grading and prepping the field for drainage and rock to come in, which is prepared underneath the artificial turf. We are currently, the project is currently been designed and is out for bid this week. Overall, the budget, regarding the budget, the construction environment remains difficult. The turf and track have been contracted directly with our supplier, Field Turf, which the board approved at the previous meetings 2 months ago, which is great. We've been able to directly contract with them and attend purchase cooperative pricing, which is favorable. However, the seismic components in the civil works are coming in estimated higher than we originally planned on, based on our construction estimates at this time. We did engage in some cost reduction, which is often called value engineering, where we're trying to have the same effectiveness, but with another product rather than what was originally specified, in an effort to save some costs. So we don't want reduced quality and we don't want reduced scope, but oftentimes we will spec one way of doing the seismic improvement, and there's another way that we may be able to do it for the same effectiveness, but a slightly lower cost. So that's value engineering that we have engaged with already. We may need to do additional cost reduction exercises after we get the bids back. The bids are open to competitive bidding right now. They're on the street, and we expect to have the bids back in 2 to 3 weeks, at which time we'll be able to see where we're really at on the budget. So next steps, again, are the bid packages have been released. We're doing site tours for contractors to walk through and understand the full scope of work, see the current facilities. These will be various trades that will come through. We'll have electricians, we'll have carpenters, we'll have plumbers, we'll have civils, folks that come in and are dirt movers and graders, and we'll have all kinds of folks that are coming through for the various parts of this project. The fact that we're doing the seismic project, the paving project for the buses, we've got fencing in there, as well as the turf and track and everything else, makes this a great project for a lot of different contractors. We are actively doing a lot of outreach to local contractors in the district through bond projects, although this is not a bond project, but through the bond projects that we've embarked on over the last 2 years, we've had the great opportunity to work with a lot of locals. And so we're reaching out to those folks too and make sure that they're aware this next project that will become available, and see if they have interest or they have bandwidth ability to do it. The last day for requests for information, or RFIs, is March 3rd. That's where contractors will ask for clarification on the scope of work, just to make sure they're bidding accurately. We will do the final addendum on March 8th. That's an addendum to the invitation to bid that's out there, the open bidding documents. So based on the request for clarifying information, as a public body, when we answer those questions, we don't just answer them to the contractor that asked them. We publish an addenda and we put that out for all contractors. So everybody has the same information and is bidding on the same documents. So bids are due Wednesday, March 15th. And again, that's when we will have notification of where we're landing on the budget. Future actions are feedback from the board. So, understanding where we're at right now, understanding that we may be over budget, and just checking in with the board, are we on track or are we off track? And then working with stakeholders to value engineer it as necessary. And then lastly, seeking your approval to award the bid contract and move forward with construction. And with that, I welcome the feedback from the board.
Go ahead and open it up to feedback, questions.
I had a question.
Go for it.
What kind of other fundraising and ideas are we coming up with for additional funding?
That's a great question, Director Harden. And if I can answer that question in just a minute, my computer popped up that I have a low battery and I don't want to be cut off in the middle of this Zoom meeting. So let me just step away for a minute, please.
You got it.
And we made it. Thank you. So fundraising is, there's lots of opportunities. Unfortunately, we are a little bit, I don't want to say flat-footed, but you'll recall that there's been interest in this project for many, many years. And we've started and stopped fundraising in the district many times. And so it wasn't until the board approved the project and approved funding behind it that we really gained traction with the athletic community that was really in support of this project. And so that's kind of the starting point that we're at. And so the athletic director, Dante Gouge, and the principal of high school, Maren Miller, and I have recently discussed, all kinds of different fundraising opportunities to deal with advertising, and there is a board policy on that and an avenue that we can explore. I know that Chair Solowski has talked about what the group's about reaching out to the athletic community and to others, and can we do fundraisers at various athletic events? Can we partner with our teams to have stands out there to sell items, to do fundraisers for other things. And so we're at the early stages of it, and the project is at the active stage right now. So we kind of have a mismatch in fundraising and construction, if that makes sense. Then secondly, we have phase 2 and phase 3 to think about, which are largely going to require similar funding in the $2 to $3 million range. So I think it's fantastic that we get the fundraising going, and there's a lot of momentum starting to build on that, but it will probably not be useful for this project or be available for this project, if that makes sense. By the time we get significant money raised, it will likely be after this project is long been completed.
So, oh, go ahead, Director Shields.
When we're talking about the timeline, we're talking about feedback tonight, but we will have additional time to think through, and then again, another feedback loop, right? This is kind of a continual conversation. You get more information, we are able to comment and adjust. That's what I'm seeing. Am I interpreting that correctly?
The short answer I would say is yes, you are the board, right? We serve at your direction. And so you've asked us to prepare this report and provide this update, and we're happy to do so. We'll be back in front of you again after bids come due March 15th, and we will review those bids. We will do some value engineering or cost cutting exercises to do our best to get back on budget, and then we'll be coming back to you again to say, okay, this is what the project is really going to cost, right? We'll have a guaranteed maximum price at that point in time from our CMGC partner, Emmerich Construction, and you'll be able to provide feedback to us at that point in time. When we get the funding, this project will cross 2 budget years. So the appropriation that was approved already from the board reserve account in the adopted budget will expire on June 30th, but the project will not be finished. So through the budget committee, we'll have an opportunity to see, this is what it's going to take to continue the project from the board reserve account. Is that the right place, or do we want to look at supplementing it with general fund dollars? Do we want to look at supplementing it with some capital improvement dollars? Are there other things? Do we want to think about trying to pay the board reserve back over time with revenue from athletic events, or something else? I think that there's always opportunities for conversation and feedback. We welcome that, but we will be looking for your direction as well. We want to make sure we're matching the level of communication with the level of communication you'd like to receive. So please just let us know.
Will you move forward to the last slide again?
Absolutely.
So, in full transparency, I have had I have had a conversation with Paul about this, and I think that when we talk about continuing as planned, even if costs increase 10 to 15%, I think where the conversation I believe to be at was like, we're able to get kind of everything into our previous approval, except maybe some of that seismic work. And so then what it comes down to is, do we want to continue as a board saying we approved it, we want everything, or there's an opportunity for us to be like, well, now that it's going to be more, like maybe we don't want to do the seismic upgrades. So so that I think that's probably some of the feedback that you're looking for, Director Southerton. I would say that, and I'll just share my response with all of you, is that, you know, my concern is if we hold off on doing any of the seismic updates, what will happen then in the meantime if there, you know, is some type of large earthquake or something? How do our facilities, especially the stadium, stand to keep our students and staff and community safe, right? And so for me, that was kind of where I am, but I would love to hear other directors as well with their thoughts on this topic.
That was well said. Thank you, Chair Solowski. And these are intended to be prompts. So under the feedback and direction. So are there any items you would like us to revisit? Does the board want us to continue as planned, even if costs increase 10 to 15%? These aren't assumptions that you do want us to. These are prompts. We are seeking this feedback. Do you want us to continue as planned only as long as we can maintain the current budget with the current scope?
Yeah.
Or is there additional feedback and direction you have for us?
Go ahead, Director Stanley.
I think it's fairly important for us to look at those seismic renovations as pretty essential, as that facility is a facility that builds to our high school program. Our youth in elementary school use it, our middle schools use the site, community walks the track. Like, I feel like it's a gathering place for our Centennial community, not just our Centennial high school students. So I feel a pretty high sense of responsibility to make sure it is a safe place for our community to gather. That's my input.
Thank you. I'm going to go Director Lynn and then Director Shields.
Thank you. I'd like to continue as going until we see any real numbers affecting the program negatively. I think it's really important to keep our promises in terms of where it's at, and I just hope it keeps going forward. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Director Shields.
You know, you can't disagree with people being concerned about seismic issues, right? I mean, that's just a given. But how we approach it with what money we have, when we have to measure it against the other things that we're also required to cover, that's all a package of information, the pros, the cons, and back and forth that we're going to have to go through. And that was part of my prompting of my question about how much kind of time we have to be making these decisions. And it doesn't necessarily have to be this year, it can be next year. If we can get part of the funds this year from this budget and part of the funds from next year's budget is a possibility. I mean, those are all the things that we can be talking about. But one of the things that we have done, and I would like, and I'm not asking for this information tonight, Director Sutton, but I know that we have dovetailed our projects needs across the district with what we've been able to do with the bond. And we've been able to do things with ESSER funds. Doesn't mean that we can do that with seismic, but you've been magical in your way of saying, these are the ways that we can combine. And I think, as Director Lynn just said, you know, when we have more information as it relates to the budget, and we can start looking at massaging and pulling forth from different sources, we may be able to do what we would like to do maybe in this budgetary period, or over time. And I think that you have been really good at explaining what we gain by doing something now, on what we would lose if that we didn't, and what we could gain if we could wait just a budget cycle, or what we might lose if we wait. So those are the things that I'm looking forward to as we move forward or continue to think about this. And I think the budget committee, because they are members of our community, bringing them along in that kind of conversation helps for us. We've been living this. Some of us as board members have been living this, all year long, and prior years even. And some of us are new, and our budget people are a mixture of the same, right? They're brand new people in our budget committee, and they're returning members. And so we have good resources in terms of our people with our board and our budget to continue to have the conversation. And then, there will be a time to bite the bullet, right? Where you're going to ask us the question, do we or don't we? And that might be a progression from the budget committee then to us as board who make the final decision about how the budget is going to be allocated. So I'm in favor of just continuing to gather that information and relying on your expertise and feedback so that we continue to narrow down those choices that we see in front of us right now.
Wonderful. That's very helpful. And this will inform what I bring back to the board after we receive the bids and we ask for approval of a guaranteed maximum price. It's helpful for me to understand the interest and the priority and the directive of the board. There may be an opportunity to look at the project and say, we have a lot of painting in the project that's going to be in the team rooms or something like that. Maybe that's an operations thing rather than this project. Maybe that comes out of our operations and maintenance fund rather than the board account if we're over budget, and fencing is another opportunity we can look at and see, that might be something. So it's helpful for me to understand what I'm hearing is we want to maintain all the core aspects of this project as planned. And we do have an interest because the board reserve account is a one-time account, never to be necessarily replenished, right? From the sale of the surplus property. And we did experience nearly catastrophic financial problems just a few years ago. So we want to be mindful of that and the effects that it has on our students when we experience those tough times financially. So sticking to the budget, as much as we can, as closely as we can, while not compromising by any means any of the safety things, but looking for maybe a timing opportunity or an opportunity to blend allowable uses of other funds is kind of what I'm hearing from the board. Does that capture the consensus of the feedback?
I feel like that does. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you all so much. The one question that didn't get asked is, what was that wonderful cold press I had earlier on the other presentation that Superintendent Owens didn't miss, but you all might have missed? And that's a wonderful Amazon product to help your tired eyes after looking at spreadsheets all day. I didn't know my camera was still on, and I decided to try to rest my eyes before I was on for my presentation. So in case you're wondering or need to know where to get one, it is a wonderful cold press. I highly recommend. Just be mindful of when you're on Zoom. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Southerton. At this point, I want us to power through, but I'm going to insist that we take just like 7 minutes for a bio break for folks. We've been sitting here for a while. Take 7 minutes. Let's come back at 8:57 and zoom right through the rest of it. See you in a few. With your breakage. I'm going to hand it over to Superintendent Owens for the superintendent's report next.
All right. I know you've received a lot of information, so I will try to be succinct in my delivery tonight, but we'll see. And hopefully you can see that. So I will start by saying thank you for the opportunity to share with the board this evening. Chief Communications Officer Albert Rosales Correa has been working on developing consistent district branding, including consistent slide decks for presentations. So I am happy to be debuting this slide deck this evening. First, it has been an interesting weather day. As you know, we released students early from school today and we're canceling school for tomorrow. I appreciate the work of our staff as they supported students getting home safely from school. And I wanted to express special appreciation for our school bus drivers for their work today. It's only fitting, as was mentioned earlier by Chair Salowski, that today is School Bus Driver Appreciation Day, and they really came up strong today. I'm pleased to announce that Centennial is one of approximately 12 grant recipients for the LGBTQ2 SIA plus Student Success Plan for the 21-23 grant program. Centennial is receiving $150,000 to be spent by June 30th of this year. As a little background, the LGBTQ2 SIA plus Student Success Plan was developed at the direction of the legislature to develop and implement strategies to address historic and current systemic inequities experienced by students identifying as LGBTQ2 SIA plus through focused investments and partnerships with community-based organizations, school districts, tribes, education service districts, early learning providers, and post-secondary institutions. The intention is to create environments where LGBTQ2 SIA plus students have trusting relationships, feel connected to individuals in the community, and can feel their full and authentic selves. Trust, connection, and inclusion are necessary ingredients for students to succeed in reaching their full potential academically, as well as socially and emotionally. These grants are being made available to early learning hubs, providers of early learning services, school districts, ESDs, public charter schools, post-secondary institutions, tribal governments, CBOs, or a consortium of these entities to address the activities and outcomes in the grant application in alignment with the success plan strategies. The goal of these grants is to provide applicants, funds to applicants that document an understanding of the unique needs of the plan and have the potential to become exemplar programs and who create collaborative practices relating to strategies outlined in the plan. Using the plan, each applicant must develop grant activities and outcomes to meet their chosen strategies for the project. So let me get into specifics about what will take place in Centennial with the funds. Developing training regarding laws relating to anti-discrimination and anti-bullying and best practices for supporting students through the use of inclusive language, chosen names, and pronouns. Schools will engage students in the development of school-specific recommendations for addressing bullying and discrimination, engaging educators in defining and co-creating professional supports that honor their race and ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and/or gender expression, developing and funding regional student voice networks composed of current students, collaborating with and funding culturally specific organizations and local LGBTQ SIA plus supporting organizations to arrange family peer networks and culturally sustaining opportunities for families of students identifying as LGBTQ SIA plus. Potentially install consistent all-gender restroom signage along with minor physical improvements, creating best practice guidance for districts regarding how to ensure student clubs related to racial, ethnic, cultural, and gender issues are supported and included by their broader school environment, provide safe space posters and items to educators at the beginning of each school year, visibly supporting student health and safety. These could include flags, pins, and printed materials, ordering more library books and materials to increase the representation of BIPOC and gender identity and students experiencing disability. Materials and instructional items will also be purchased to support our GSA and Rainbow Clubs, and ordering supplemental sexuality and health education materials. So there's a lot of strategies that are embedded for the use of those funds. What I'll say is to be one in a group of 12 recipients out of 197 districts throughout the state is impressive. And I want to give kudos to Director of Student Services, Denise Wright, and her team for their efforts in securing this grant to support our students. So I'm actually going to leave it at that topic. I have more topics, but in case anybody has questions on that topic, because I just gave a lot of information, or if Denise wants to share any information beyond what I just shared.
So I found out today there were 44 organizations that applied. And so out of the 44, we still are the only single standing school district that was awarded the grant. There are consortiums that are made up of multiple school districts or school districts partnering with other organizations or educational service districts. And so it's a huge shout out. And you know, this is something that saves students' lives on a daily basis. And so for all the folks that have been supporting this work, our GSA and our Rainbow Club facilitators, as well as middle school students and high school students who provided input on the plan, I'm just like forever grateful. And we have a lot of work to do. We have to do it really fast. So it's really exciting.
This is so wonderful. If there's any, since it is going to be done, you know, a quick turnaround, if there's any support that you need from us, like, please let us know. If it's, I mean, anything minor from like, I don't even know, showing up, buying books, whatever you need, like, this is huge. And I just really appreciate it, all the work, and a huge honor. Director Shields.
I just wanted to say I have a granddaughter who's very active with the GSA Club, and I hear about it every time we see each other, and how important it is in her life, and the people that support her and the people that she supports in the club environment. So yeah, kudos. This is amazing. I can't wait to like text her. I wanted to take a picture of the screen. So it's like, oh, look, you know, there's recognition for this, because I just recently we were having a conversation about the lack of recognition sometimes, and some of the difficulties that there are. And we all know how difficult high school can be, right? Just on the surface of being a high schooler, let alone having some of the other challenges that all of these letters represent to us. So I'm very pleased, and on a very personal level, as well as a grandma.
Great. I'll keep us going. I appreciate it. Last Friday, I had the opportunity to attend the Centennial High School Black History Month Assembly. The assembly was planned and led by students in the Centennial High School Black Student Union with support from Sun and REAP partners. Students had the opportunity to hear speakers highlight the origins of Black History Month, provide examples of Black excellence, and also provide examples of struggles that Black individuals and groups have worked to overcome. Kudos to the students who coordinated the assembly and to the adults who helped support their efforts. And I'll offer Mr. Miller the opportunity because he was there and helped to lead the effort as well, if he has any additional comments to make.
No, just to reiterate what you said, Superintendent Owens, it was a great assembly. Our students definitely showed their pride and support for our diverse community. And there were several times during the presentations that you could hear a pin drop in that auditorium, even though, you know, all of the student body was there, because they were showing their pride in what makes our school great, and that's the diversity. And it was just great to be there and see that. So yes, kudos to all the students and the BSU for putting it on, and then for all the adults that helped it, and for the student body.
Great, thank you. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to join Gresham Barlow Superintendent James Hugh in speaking to the Gresham Area Chamber Monthly Business Leaders Luncheon. It was the first time that either district has had the opportunity to share an update with the Gresham Chamber since the onset of the pandemic. Superintendent Hugh and I each had the opportunity to share how our respective districts have been addressing the pandemic-related challenges for our communities, specifically unfinished learning for students. We also were able to both feature information about recent bond work as well as our strategic planning efforts. The Gresham Area Chamber of Commerce and the local businesses that they represent are a solid partner with the Centennial School District, and they were endorsers of the Centennial 2020 Capital Bonds Project. So it was nice to be able to provide the audience with information about what has been happening in Centennial and the work that they help to support. As I mentioned in my weekly update to the board and wanted to take an opportunity to feature in my report, Centennial is partnering with the Gresham Rotary to distribute dictionaries to fourth graders in each of our district's elementary schools. This has been a long-standing tradition, though typically it's been third grade instead of fourth grade. So far, I've had the opportunity to participate in dictionary distributions at Meadows, Powell Butte, and Pleasant Valley Elementary Schools, with Patrick Lynch, Park Lane, and Butler Creek still to come. Particularly in the digital age, I recognize the reactions that some might have about the relevance of physical dictionaries. And I can say that so far, overall, students and their teachers have been pretty excited about receiving them. And it wouldn't be a superintendent's report without an update about strategic planning. And as you heard earlier tonight, we're in the home stretch. As a brief update, last evening, the instructional focus team met for the final time. As an update, the instructional focus team shepherds the process with a focus on instruction from beginning to end, identifying professional practices and instructional approaches and strategies that will enhance the effectiveness of our instructional programs, shaping the future direction of high quality teaching and learning. True to its purpose, last night the committee spent 3 hours together virtually with a focus on matching universal system-side key actions and targeted equity-specific key actions to the draft pillars in the plan. I want to express appreciation for the instructional professionals that were a part of the instructional focus team. We have some high caliber equity-focused educators in Centennial, and I'm grateful for their involvement in the development of our plan. And as an aside, I don't know why Director Southerton felt he needed to explain himself with his thing earlier, but knowing that I take screenshots of people looking in awkward positions, I think he was a little afraid of what I might have captured when I saw him. So all of that's to say is that when you see these, it's like I take a few and I try to pick the best one that has the least people looking awkward, but it doesn't always work. All right. Finally, equity audits continue. As a reminder, an equity audit is an involved process including 2 to 3 day site visits, 360-degree surveys for students, for parents, and for families, and a policy and practices review for each site. This week, Centennial Middle School, Butler Creek, and Park Lane Elementary Schools and Centennial Virtual Academy are participating. Next week will be Meadows and Pleasant Valley Elementary Schools. And I think with the weather this week, we're going to have a little bit of rescheduling that we need to do to make that happen. In fact, Dr. Katsuda and I were on the phone with a couple of the facilitators that were in the airport, ready to board the plane in San Diego and asking, are we still coming for tomorrow? And we said, we can't make a school-based closure decision based on just one thing, but if we were to make a decision right now, probably not. So you might want to cancel the flight. So they were able to cancel it before they got on the plane today. So we'll have to do a little rescheduling. So with that report and a couple of asides in mind, that is my superintendent's report. I welcome any questions and comments you might have. And that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Owens. Open it up to hands at this point. Anybody got anything? Awesome. I did have one thing, not related to your report, but just related to the snow. I was really looking forward to the multicultural event tomorrow night, and it's probably not going to be happening, but I'm really hopeful that we can find a way to reschedule that. It looked like there were some great local businesses supporting food. Yeah, I was really looking forward to that. So I'm a bummer. It's a bummer that we have to cancel that for tomorrow. All right. We are at, let me pull up my agenda here. Oh, confirmation items. We're so close, you guys. So the confirmation items submitted in board book. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the confirmation items.
I second it.
Excellent. Any questions or comments before we move forward? Great. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 That's a unanimous vote for the folks that are here. We've passed the confirmation items. Good luck to our high seas down in Salem for their tournament or their thing. I read it right. And next up, old business. I don't see anything on the agenda. No old business, no new business. But I bet Superintendent Owens has some future business items he'd like to touch base on.
I've got 4 that I see on the horizon at the next meeting, which are the strategic plan initial presentation, the annual audit report, our license contract extension and renewals. And then I believe we have the GMGC award for the ESSER projects, specifically the HVAC at Powell Butte, Park Lane, Patrick Lynch, and Meadows, if I'm not mistaken. I saw some head nods from Director Southerton.
Yeah, that's correct, Superintendent Owens, and we likely will also have awarding the CMGC contractor for all those projects. So you'll recall the board approved the CMGC process because of the complexity and the nature of all those projects. That's has been posted. We've received replies, and now we'll be interviewing and having a recommendation for the board.
Fantastic. Go ahead, Director Shields.
Just a quick question. We had mentioned summer planning. I mean, the annual schedule for the board, which is, second, fourth, with the exception of. But I know we talked a little bit about maybe giving board members a heads up about, think about what your summer plans are. And if you know, great. If you don't know yet, kind of think about it, because you're going to be asked soon enough about a July and an August meeting, because I know in the past we've been able to schedule those a little bit around people's schedule. It doesn't necessarily mean we always have to stay to that second, fourth situation, but it also involves our district staff and when they're available. So it's kind of nice to have some idea about what your summer is looking like so that you can give feedback to the district office about your availability for a July meeting. There's one meeting in July and there's one meeting in August that would be traditionally scheduled on Wednesday, but what Wednesday is really at the discretion of us to talk about. So it's nice if we have some information beforehand. So be thinking about that information.
Yeah, last August we did a retreat, and I'm curious. I would love, not at this moment, but as we're talking about that, I thought it was great. But if there's any major naysayers, now might be the time to express that to me. Director Stanley?
I have 2 clarifying questions as the newbie sitting here. Are those summer meetings typically during the day or evening?
So they're typically during the evening, but however, the board retreat, we did a daytime thing last year. And so those of us with other places had to ask for time away.
And then your August retreat is typically beginning, middle, end August. When is that?
Super flexible.
Okay. I have some things that happen in August.
Yep.
So.
And that's the whole thing about if we can narrow it down, it's kind of like, these are, I've got a family reunion and I'm going to be gone.
Yep.
Those are the kinds of things that we know that happen. And it's true with our district staff too. So it's a matter of just.
Is that information that we should be submitting to anyone? Is there a calendar committee yet, or?
We haven't pulled that one together, but maybe that's something we could start thinking about. Because you're going to have new board members, and whether the training is as long as we had previously, which was great. or more of an abbreviated one. That's another thing that maybe needs to be discussed and what we'd like to see in the training. But it's always good when we can have Oregon School Board Association, OSBA, refresh us and get us kind of back, get us on the same page as new board members, or the new board, because it will be the new board. And it's really good for us to have that base training to say, this is it, and these are our focus. And I think Chair Slusky, you'll have to remind me, but I think in our operating agreement, we're supposed to review those on an annual basis as well, and make any changes. So
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We could do.
yeah,
something.
there's at least a few things that'll need to be done.
Great. Anything else for the good of the order?
I have one thing.
Go for it.
I had a chance to go to OMSI with 5 of my grandkids, which was a great deal of fun. We were watching a presentation, and one of my grandkids who goes to Centennial says, "That is one of my substitute teachers giving the presentation," and went up to her after the fact and introduced herself. And this, I don't have her name, I apologize, but she said, she says, "You are one of my favorite schools to sub at. I always enjoy having an opportunity to come to Centennial and be a substitute there." So it was a nice exchange to see between my freshman granddaughter and a person she'd already seen as a substitute, but see her in a different role as this presenter at this OMSI event, but to have then her reciprocate and talking about our district. And it's like, yeah, and I love coming out to your school and stuff. So it's nice to have those kind of comments, just come up organically. So wanted to tell you guys about it. And the exhibit for Marvel Studios is absolutely incredible. That's it.
Awesome. Director Stanley, did you have something?
I just want to go on record and thank the principals at Oliver Middle School, Jeb Hubbs at Butler Creek, Gail Sedaris, and at Powell Butte, Jared Austin, for incredibly wonderful visits on Friday. And I want to explicitly state that the community at Oliver is remarkable. Every student that walked by, their principal said hello, asked how he was doing. He talked with them, they talked back. And I spend my life in schools, and you know when you've got a good community when a kid who doesn't have to stop and talk to you does. So I just encourage any of you that have not, that can, to go right into the schools, because it really was delightful. I sang songs with kindergartners, supervised recess at Powell Butte, and got to tour one of the new gyms. So anyway, it was just really, really wonderful. So just explicitly thanking the principals and staff that welcomed me. I appreciate it very much.
That's incredible. Thank you for doing that. All right, everybody, it's been a long one. You've worked really hard. Stay warm and stay safe at home tomorrow. The meeting is adjourned at 9:16 p.m.
Can we have our cabinet members stay on for a minute? The reason being, and we can stop the recording. I want to end the endless text thread here and figure out